Han enjoyed walking through one of the gardens inside the stronghold. Seeing all the various birds and animals inside a near paradise, his mood had never been better. He had created a large hill with gently rising slope on one side, with a massive oak tree at the top. Sitting down, he enjoyed the sight around him with a lush forest on one side and a grassy prairie on the other. Between the two was a pristine river that was forked by the hill. Graceful bridges connected each side. With elegant movements like water, his two demon slaves laid on either side of him. Upon leaving the containment unit for their transformation, they looked enhanced in their beauty. Due to the way they were connected to one another, his power had made it so they became like one being, with their thoughts becoming nearly joined and their mannerisms mirroring one another. He had named the first Doi and the second Noe. One of their abilities was a shapeshift, becoming anything they needed to be. Their mannerisms reminded him of the beautiful ninjas that stayed close to the last boss in the TV show. Even their outfits were similar to what many fanboys would think of as being sexy ninjas. Standing to his side was the former queen of the Elven Kingdom. With how close the elves were to the elements of nature, her appearance became a mixture of nature. Depending on her emotional state, her body would phase between various elements. Currently, her body and clothes gave off the appearance of the forest. Her long hair like wavy vines that moved in the wind. Her ears were like the soft leaves that mimicked her former elvish ears. More than her former self, she gave off a feeling of permanence and maturity. In his garden, she didn't bother with the need of the visual appearance of clothes, allowing him to enjoy the view of her body. Sensing his eyes on her, she turned to face him and slowly went to her knees. Positioning herself so that she was laying on her side, she was able to lounge on his legs. Han enjoyed the way that her breasts brushed up against his legs. "So you were saying?" He reached out and touched her hair. As his hand came closer, she unconsciously shifted to appear closer to her original hair. Feeling his fingers running through her hair, Ellis, the name he called her by, tried to act calm as she talked, but the slowly spreading red on her face ruined such efforts. "Master, the overflow has been going on for a time much longer than normal. By now, the monsters should have dispersed to wherever they go to at the end of the overflow. I think something is going on to keep them here." He thought to himself, as he considered Ellis's words. "Doi, what do you know about this?" he asked Doi, who seemed content just to lay her head on his shoulder. "We are only aware of Dom Naster using the overflow to finish off the elves and Master City. Though the demons are connected with the overflow, we do not have direct control of the Varj and release them to prevent them from being completely released all at once, Master," she answered. "How about the gods?" Han asked. "We do not know, for they only communicated with Dominaster. We are considered too insignificant to deserve an audience with them," Noye said, with no emotions, as if she was just stating a fact of life. Turning his head to place his face into Noye's hair, Han said, "It seems that we may need to have a chat with your former leader. What do you guys think of an adventure?" "We only desire to be by our master's side, as his loyal slaves," Noye on his right voiced, as Doi moved to begin kissing his neck as she sighed and moaned in pleasure. "I will also accompany you, Master," Ellis stated as she smiled, looking up at him. "Leaving you behind is not something that came across my mind," he smiled at her, as he placed his index finger beneath her chin, gently tilting her head up and watching her smile brought in joy. "Prepare everyone. I want to make sure that my intent is clearly understood. Han ordered, with malice in his voice. As you wish, master. Helania's voice was heard as she stepped forward from behind the tree. It appears that my little rest will need to be placed on hold. My beautiful ruler and my lovely slaves. Han sighed as he stood. Aside from a slight sigh from Ellis, the twins had merely risen in tandem with him. As if it was the most natural thing, they stood slightly behind on either side of him as he walked. Ellis took a position on his right side on the other side of the twin. He enjoyed the way the slope gently led to the bottom towards the bridge leading into the forest. At the top of the bridge's arch, an elaborate-looking door appeared and opened to reveal a pink-haired maid. She walked through the doorway and bowed to Han. Going through the doorway, he was led to his throne room. Waiting for him were his creations. Aside from Minatoria, who seemed to live on her floor, seeing all of them kneeling in front of his throne made him realize how the number of creations was increasing. Though he never intended for him to have so many, his heart was set at ease to see so many who felt only love for him. Having a seat on his throne, he leaned onto one of the armrests. From what I have been told, the overflow has been going on for quite a long time. If things stay the same, the overflow could continue for several months. I do not know if that is the case, but it's still an image that is not good for those in places other than our own, both Felicitas and the Elven Kingdom. He paused to let his words sink in. I have a feeling that things are being artificially prolonged to make things difficult for us, though we do not have any worries from such a minor thing. Glancing over to Celestra, he asked, "How do you imagine we should proceed?" Without lifting up her head, Celestra answered, "Master, I believe that ending the current overflow is something that would benefit all, though it may not be an issue for us." His eyes moved over to Hayun, who said, "Though there is no need for you, my master, to lift a finger to help anyone, I also agree with Celestra. Just as with the Elven Kingdom, I see an opportunity to show others the power of Felicitas." "Brittany, what do you think of this idea?" he quietly asked her. "Master, you only have to say the word, and I will go out and eliminate the overflow myself. I will tear them apart and rain blood in your glory. There is no need for you to dirty your divine hands," Brittany said with conviction and fervor. Han chuckled at Brittany's words. "My beautiful Brittany, your conviction does bring me comfort." As if thinking to himself, he said, "I do like the idea of going to the demon's location and having him share his thoughts on the matter." Without any further thoughts on the matter, Han stood and walked towards the doorway to the throne room. Behind him, his other creations followed after him. The door, upon opening, led him to a desert outside Felicitas, in a spot where the overflow was not present. Though the overflow had a mind-blowing number of monsters that composed it, they were not everywhere and only appeared to look endless in front of cities which they tended to target. Out on the desert, Han casually looked around and stated, "Rise." All around them, the desert seemed to shake with enough power to level a modern city on Earth. In front of him, a large amount of sand began to rise as if a mountain was forming. Oceans of sand cascaded down off the growing mound. From inside the mountain, there were feathered-looking hairs poking out from beneath the sand. No longer able to contain what was inside, a peak of a head emerged. This head was followed by a second and third head. Each head was scaled with a massive snout, and when the beast opened its mouth, the lower part split apart to expose rows upon rows of teeth. An ear-shattering roar was blasted out of the center head's mouth, and fire shot out. The other two were nearly as loud, with the one on the left spouting out large ice crystals and looking as if a blizzard was pouring out, while the other one on the right released lightning. Two enormous arms exploded out of the sand and came crashing down on top of the desert. Like a creature pulling itself out of an ocean, the rest of its monstrous body could be seen. When half of its body was pulled out, 4 large wings appeared and blocked out the sky. All of them were covered in its shadow in an instant. The back half finally was seen, and a long tail seemed to be endlessly pulled out of the ground. Once the creature was out of the desert, it shook its body, and sand seemed to rain down to the ground. When it felt free of any loose debris, it turned its body to orient itself to Han. Lowering all 3 of its heads, the dragon seemed to be introducing itself to Han. "From now on, you will be called Omegan," Han said. As he walked towards Omegan, it moved one of its arms and presented its hand to Han. Once Han and the twins were comfortably placed, it raised its hand to the top of the middle head. When it stopped, Han and the twins walked on top of its head, which seemed like it could fit a small city. "Where is Dominus to hold up?" Han asked Doi. "He is located to the north, near the Empire in the main temple," she answered. Without needing a command, Omegan began moving its rings and creating a sandstorm. Slowly, it rose into the air and made its way to the north. Han turned his head and watched each of his creations make their preparation to follow him. Those who were unable to fly made use of Haiyun's reapers that could fly. Since the time that Haiyun gained her creatures, there was a more extensive selection to choose from. There were a dozen different ones that could fly into the air, some of them looking like miniature dragons, though closer to insects than giant lizards. Helania's body began to expand as she transformed into a dragon form, which was larger than Celestra's pet dragon. Faster than Omegan, she shot into the air and glided next to it. Celestra's dragon, which usually hung out on her shoulder, grew to its standard size and followed after them. Queen used one of her skeletal dragons as a transport. Seeing the number of dragons that were behind Omegan, Han wondered what those in cities would think of the winged dragons flying above them. From what Han was told, dragons were rarely seen and stayed in isolated locations to tend to their own matter. Beneath them, the ground was devoid of any light as they passed over forest and farmland. They saw plenty of the Varj as they moved in monstrous groups. Some of the Varj would occasionally look up at them, especially the large-looking ones. "Destroy," Han commanded. The 2 other heads of Omegan directed their mouths at the Varj, and a mixture of sub-zero temperatures and the heat that could rival a star tore through the Varj. Looking behind him, he watched as Helania spat out black orbs that ground anything it hit into dust. The way they seemed to distort the air around them and phase in and out of space was mesmerizing. He enjoyed hearing the monsters scream in agony. At least he assumed they were screaming in pain. There was no real attempt to destroy the Varj, as he just glided over them. It was close to how he used to step on a line of ants when he was walking to school. He noticed that both Queen and the Haiyun had summoned their own respective forces, and seemed to compete over who could tear through the Varj faster. It was interesting to watch the dead versus a species designed to kill. He was impressed with both of their powers. People often referred to the overflow as being similar to death, but he imagined that such a word would be reserved for him as they flew and left behind a gaping path of destruction and decay. Both Queen and Haiyun had creatures that flooded a path full of toxic poison, where it hovered and failed to dissipate. It would likely be that such a cloud would only dissipate after a week. Master, we approach, Doi and Noi spoke in unison. They both had a finger pointing at where the temple was located, which appeared to be carved into the face of a cliff, looking like one of those statues in Asia.